He has acre.
Let's go.
Welcome back to the Just Like You and Me podcast. We have Ivan Ortiz with us today. Ivan, thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Ben, thank you for having me. I brought my son with me to make sure that everybody stays in good behavior and good spirits.
That's all we need.
Prevent me from swearing.
Yeah.
We've only ever had one guest actually bring their kids to the podcast so far.
Yeah.
Me?
No.
It was
Oh, I'm sorry. One other is what I meant to say.
Oh, okay.
yeah. Rocco.
You're the second.
Well, Rocco had to.
Yeah. It was funny because she was just crawling around. You could hear her in the background.
Yeah.
And then you'll see sometimes the camera would just like move because she was like grabbing onto it. It's like, that's what happens when you're in the basement doing a little small podcast.
And that girl deserved to be on camera because she's the most adorable thing in the world.
Yeah, she's absolutely fantastic. It was
Made the podcast a little bit better.
Yeah, they went to Rome. So as the Chesterton Academy senior class trip, right? So they're going to do it every 2 years. So while the school's still small, they're just, they're going to do 2 classes instead of 1. So they brought 6 kids to Rome, and Kiara went, and so did Rocco's wife, Frances, as chaperones, a couple other people, etc. But 2 of my kids went, and my second oldest daughter, she's just mom skills, So she's like, I thought it was weird that I was babysitting and I was having a good time in Rome babysitting.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was just going to, but Rome was so overwhelming, like another beautiful church today. Really? We got to go to Rome. And it wasn't like out of like spite or disinterest. It was just like, I can't look at more beauty.
Yeah.
It was like overwhelming, She's like, Dad, I didn't want to. I just couldn't.
Yeah. It only takes so much.
Yeah.
It is a very overwhelming city. And it literally is every single building that you go into. You could be walking down the most random alley, and there will be the most inconspicuous door that you'll see. But then you open it up, and like it's 50 feet above you. It's just this gold shining ceiling with Renaissance paintings everywhere. It's just in a random alley, and then you see that there's like a corpse, and you're like, oh wait, that's the body of Saint Lucia.
That's the other funny thing.
Yeah.
Is corpses and artifacts everywhere. It's like a giant archaeological dig, right? Yeah. But it's like when you think about the way the prior to the modern world, the way the people who lived before us were expressed their faith. It was everything.
Mm-hmm.
So when they built the house for God, they built the best. And people look at it like, oh, they just stole the riches. No, like you have these communities of a few hundred people, and they're plowing their field for 3 or 4 hours a day, and then spend the rest of the week building a church.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you, right? We give everything to God, right? So they basically work to live, and then the rest of their life, or work to survive, and then the rest of their life was to build a community, build a church.
And that's beautiful.
And they had parties, they had feasts, like the ebb and flow of the feasts and the fasting periods and all that other stuff. It was daily. So every single thing you did every single day, all the food you grew, the crops, when crops were out of season and all that other stuff, your fasting season began. They just made everything line up together, and it was all sacrificial, or even the feasting part, right? So I have a friend who was some kind of Eastern Orthodox. I don't remember what sect of Eastern Orthodoxy he belonged to, but when they have Easter, like their fasting for Easter or for Lent was brutal, right? Like totally brutal. It wasn't like giving up M&Ms or something stupid like that. Like they're literally like giving up all sorts of food, right? And it's just the way they've done it for centuries, right? That's the code, right? And then when Easter came, like Easter Sunday till the following Sunday, they treated every single one of those days as 7 Easters in a row. 7 Sundays, I'm sorry. So all of Easter week was 7 Sundays. And the intent there was after the season of fasting where they were like starved and emaciated. And I mean, they were fasting so much, like they had a lot of kids, and they first started doing that. So one of the things they fasted from was dairy. And all of a sudden bone breaks started skyrocketing. Like, oh, we got to do some calcium supplementation here, because they'd converted to Orthodoxy. Anyway, but, as they were learning all these different things, but the 7 days of Easter, the 7 Sundays, the rule or the practice was that if you saw something that you like food-wise, you ate it. Even if you were already like you just ate dinner and then all of a sudden there's a candy bar over there, you eat it. Because the intention there was that for those 7 days, you get to experience the overabundance of heaven. Like you can't even, so going back to what I was saying about like Rome, right? It's like there's an overabundance of beauty there. We live in a society that has no beauty, right? We ate beauty, through all the different disgusting things that we do, like porn and drugs and getting hammered and all that other stuff. We try to ape pleasure and beauty, but it's not real. Right?
Yeah.
It's all fake. We just try to like get cheap beauty and, AI and all other stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
but the same thing, that overwhelming beauty, it's exhausting. Overwhelming bounty, it's exhausting. I think it should be.
A big part of it is really because, like you said, you made that point about how we live where we live right now in the times that we live in, right? There is no beauty in our society, but also it's the convenience of everything. I think one of the big things when you go to Rome, it's the historicity of the city, right? It's so old.
Yeah.
And the same thing, like I remember when I went to Notre Dame in Paris for the first time. This is before it caught on fire. So it still had all the really good stuff at the top. Yeah. It was just really insanely beautiful. One thing that someone made a point to me was that, you don't really think about it, but this church took 800 years to fully build. That means that when the people first put down the first cornerstones, they had no vision of anything of what this church was going to look like at the end. But they knew that throughout the whole course of it being built, that it needed to have a big impression of beauty.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wasn't worth building. It's not worth spending 800 years putting stones on top of another if they're not going to be beautiful.
Right.
Whereas nowadays, it takes, a year and a half to build a skyscraper, right? Something that's above 500 feet tall.
Yeah.
That doesn't need to look beautiful because the amount of time that's invested into it is just, it's not the same.
And its amount of time that's expected out of it is very little as well, right?
Yeah,
Because it's all disposable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have these things, and that's the beauty of like standing the test of time. Like you look at Rome and you look at all these, they were built to be forever, right? But that's everything. Everything they built back then was for a legacy, right? For a long-term legacy because they're building the kingdom of God, especially in the Christian side. And even in the pagans, right? They didn't have a sense of like, oh, we're going to die and this is all going to go away. Mm-hmm. No, it's the opposite. It's like, we're going to die. We better build it good so that there's something for the next generation. So these people are building this 800-year construction project, right? So their kids weren't going to see it. Their grandkids weren't going to see it. Their great-grandkids. I mean, you're talking, how many generations we're going to see the completion of this thing. And truly they were functional at some point,
right,
and before the 800 years is complete. But you look at like La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, right? And the interesting thing about it, that is, it's not your classic beauty, but the more you look at it, it's like a distorted sense of like modern people trying to be beautiful. And it captures its own sense of the demise of our society.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful in that, right?
It's actually very symbolic.
It's almost like seeing a broken man, like a homeless man who's just had life kick the stink out of him, and he's homeless, but he's still smiling, and he's just trying to just keep it together for the one more day. And you just look at him, and you're like, damn. And all the burdens you have, and you're just like grumbling through life, and you see some dude who might be panhandling or whatever, and you're just like, hey man, just happy where he is, So it's like I try to look at those things and say, okay, maybe this isn't the pinnacle of objective beauty, but that's how I felt about it when I first saw the place, But now looking at it, because I've seen pictures of it as it's nearing completion, and I'm like, there's something striking about it. Same thing with the mosaic behind Saint Sebastian's altar. First time I looked at that thing, I was like, ugh. And then I took off my glasses, and I have to look at it focused, and there's something there. Like there's a statement from the artist that you can capture, and it's been a long time since I looked at it, so I really contemplated this enough. But again, just the concept of the idea, just looking at this guy try to give us a message, and again, speaking through modern art, which I think is just a terrible medium. I think it's just too distorted and too whacked out to really convey focused. But that's the irony of why I said when I took off my glasses and I looked at it through a blurred vision, it hit me. And I just think about that. I think most of modern society is looking at the world through like a kaleidoscope or a blurred vision or something.
Yeah, because you can see the authenticity and what he's actually trying to put into that art piece.
The authenticity of intent, as opposed to what he actually came up with.
Yeah,
So.
And like, have you been to Our Lady of Cedars in Fairlawn? Like what they have behind the altar and a bunch of other paintings they have there. They had a local parishioner paint all of those, and he did the best he possibly could. But if you would compare it to anything else, it'd be like, okay, it doesn't really hit. But the what he's putting behind it is a beautiful intention.
Yeah.
But I love this topic. I think it's fantastic. I want to get back to it. But before that, we want to get to know who Ivan Ortiz is. We've heard stories. We've talked to you. but we really want to just get everything here. That's what we're here for.
I signed an NDA.
Excited.
Like you said,
Many NDAs.
his lawyer is right here. So.
Yeah, we have our lawyer on camera, so we know what we can and cannot say.
So where do you want me to start? I mean, there is a significant amount of... Let me frame it like this. I was literally sitting down and thinking about... I grew up in Miami in the 80s and 90s. And for a kid, it's normal, right? Where you grew up, it's normal. And then as I've gone back and contemplated the things that were happening in Miami in the 80s and 90s, right? So you're thinking Miami Vice puts it on the map for, as a vacation place, but crime, right? Then you have the Miami Hurricanes in football, Dolphins making the Super Bowl, drug lords moving through Miami, Europeans vacationing in Miami, South Americans escaping whatever communist downfall coming to Miami. So it's huge influx of Hispanics, huge influx of Europeans of all sorts for vacations or whatever. Northerners escaping the cold, go to Miami. And so all of a sudden I'm caught in a place where everything and everyone is happening there, to some extent or another, and in a way that's not happening anywhere else, really. And it's not to be like, oh, Miami's better than anything else. It was a unique crossroads of all these different things that were happening in the world. And as a result, gave me access to everything, it was just, and I never contemplated until really within the last 6 months, it just dawned on me. I was like, oh my gosh, I've done and seen everything, so many things. We talk about the rise of sexuality in the country and how it's going in this direction, 80s. Mm-hmm. That was high school for me, everything that we experience now, I've seen it already before, so, going to Miami Beach and hanging out with, as we called them back then, it's like, okay. So I'm not uncomfortable with the topic. And literally as a result of that upbringing where my parents were trying to raise me Catholic, but then I was going out and hanging out with my friends and we were always on adventures and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I experienced everything, but on the negative side, obviously there's a lot of sin involved, hedonism, etc. But on the positive side, it made me comfortable with everybody. No one can tell me anything and have me be like, ugh, and I have no more pearls to clutch, So that's made it really easy for me to learn from a lot of people, So it doesn't matter if you're you've been the pious Midwestern farm girl, you never got out of your ankle length dress and you prayed your rosary every day. I could talk to that girl for hours and just learn so much from her. Or the dude who's been a party animal, Australian, traveling the world and seeing everything. I could literally talk to them for hours and be like, whoa, that's crazy, And I don't have any value difference between the two of them, their experience doesn't mean a thing to me, it does, or it doesn't change anything to me, or I don't put oh, that one's better than that person or anything like that. I just literally couldn't care less, So all that framework in the background. So when I was growing up, like I said, it was my dad had a conversion when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I was hospitalized it was mono, but the doctors didn't know it was mono. They thought it was leukemia. So we were in New York as I was little. We didn't move to Miami till 83. I was 8 years old, his age. So that's my dad had his conversion, which is a crazy story. So the series of events happened. So I was sick. He prayed that God would save me because he didn't want to lose me. He had no idea what that meant, but so he that helped his conversion. And at one point, he was looking for a sign, what to do next, because he was baptized Catholic and confirmed or whatever, but he had just fallen away. It was the 70s. Who cares, right? And where was he? I think he was talking to my mom's dad, and my mom's dad produced from their basement. Now, mind you, my dad was born and raised in Cuba, and he left Cuba when he was 15, 16 years old and came to the States. And then he moved to New York, and that's where my mom was born and raised. And so at this time in the late 70s, he was having a conversation with his father-in-law, my grandfather, my mom's dad. And the guy produced my dad's communion card. He said, hey, look, I found this in my cigarette boxes. And my dad looked at it. He's like, how do you have this? I don't know. Just found it. Just cleaned some stuff out. This came out. Thought I'd give it to you. Maybe you like it. That profound moment, my dad instantly made the connection. Like, God's talking to me. I better listen, and I'm changing my life, you know? So that's the guy I grew up with, right? Totally ignorant of his faith. Knew nothing about the faith. Just knew that God's talking. You better listen. And he started attending church and started to do the whole thing. But he came in probably through the charismatic renewal of some sort, like the 70s era, post-Vatican II, all the like, oh, you just wave your hands and Jesus will help you, all that non-standard silliness that was happening. But he was an aeronautical engineer. So he needed facts. And he needed data. And he needed research. So that dude read anything and everything that had to do with the church. And so he was intellectually understanding of the church. But he still carried a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of, feelings of, and this is me describing it from the outside, not things that he told me. This is just me trying to understand. And so I could tell that he felt shame for his sin, but he didn't know how to reconcile, So it made him very angry, because he would look at us and be like, stop screwing up your life. And I only know that because I do the same thing. So, it was a very oppressive Christian upbringing. So all I try to do is escape it, because I'm looking at my dad who's not happy, my mom who's, combating my dad, they're having their spats. And I wouldn't say it was a bad relationship, but it wasn't something that as a kid I was looking up to and being like, I live in a great life, Mm-hmm. I just looked at it and I was like, this sucks. I need something better. And in Miami, I found it, anything and everything, whatever that meant. And it's not something I like to talk about because as far as in detail, because it's not important what I was into, but what was important is that it was sinful and it was bad and it was destroying my soul. And that's all that mattered. And I got separated. My brother and I ended up getting separated into 2 different schools because my dad felt like I lived under my brother's shadow. So I went to a different Catholic school. It was a new Catholic school. It was Byzantine. Top-notch education, classical liberal arts education, phenomenal. But when I got there, I didn't want to be there because I had no sports and I wanted to play football. And I felt like my dad stole my opportunity to play football. So mad. I ended up getting them to start a football team 2 years in, but I told the principal, the headmaster, that he goes, so what do you want to get out of the school? And I was like, me. And he's like, oh, you just want to develop yourself? And I was like, no, I want to get kicked out. I said, if it's the last thing I do, I will get kicked out of here. I will not graduate from this school. And he goes, that's not going to happen. Your dad already told us everything you're going to try to do, and you're not going to get kicked out. We got you. So I got kicked out in my senior year and ended up in military school. But the whole time I was there, terrible conduct grades. I probably had Saturday detention from the day I walked in the door. I had detentions every single day at the time I was there. Navigating my way, learning how to negotiate out of every single bad thing that I did. And then it finally was enough. Like the guy finally lost his mind. He's like, I can't keep this kid anymore. That was actually one of the last things I said to him is like, I told you. He was so mad. Plus the other thing too is that he was really mad because I was academically good. I still had straight A's. I still had top-notch grades and top-notch scores, and I learned at a quick rate, And he was just furious. He's like, you're just throwing your life away. And I was like, I'm throwing your life away. It's not for me, man. Went to military school, found structure, understood now that structure is a very important thing. Excelled there, realized that pissing everybody off was not probably the best approach to life, it was mostly enforced by my peers, the adults were there, but in the military school, the kids ran the school, So it was very competitive, but very collegial, like you found your buddies. I still have friends there to this day. I go to that reunion every year if I can. Every year we have an alumni weekend, and every year I try to go, But at the same time, there's a lot of kids that went to school there that were just abused. It was a military school. They got their asses kicked every day, and that was the end of it. And they hated it. They never want to go back. But I found a lot of great friends, all walks of life, all political spectrums, all religious spectrums. But it was affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. So, as is my disposition, I'm a contrarian to every damn thing I see. And so I would fight the chaplain. We had Bible class, and I would just disagree with everything he said. because he was wrong, man. I grew up Catholic and I knew my faith.
Yeah.
Suddenly. And so as a result, I started calling my dad on a regular basis. He had an 800 number, and the only phones we had back then were pay phones.
Yeah.
So I just literally dial up his 800 number and be like, you know what this guy said today? And for my dad, he's like, my kid loves his faith. And I'm like, no, I still love fighting, but as long as you think that's cool, just give me some ammo, dude.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things to argue against was purgatory, right? Because, you know, the Baptists don't believe in purgatory. And the funny thing was, like, I got thrown out of class that day. It was great. When he introduced, and he goes, I don't remember how he came up with him, but he said, heaven or hell. That's all he got. You're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. And just in my nonchalant way, I was like, or purgatory. And like, I'm sitting probably midway of the class, and all the other Southern Baptists are like, and there's probably 2 or 3 Catholics in the school or in the class too. And they're like, yes. And the chaplain, this big, obese man, you know, and that'll come in later. He's like, excuse me? And I was like, purgatory. There is no purgatory. And I was like, what? And he's like, there's no purgatory, son. And I'm like, but, and it's military school, so you gotta be careful, you know. So I was like, Argh. Anyway, we're on the phone, Dad. What's up? So he's like, well, here's the scripture references to purgatory. Oh, that's right. He said it's not in scripture, right? Run back to my class the next day or day after. And he's like, I was like, hey, Chaplain Waddell. God rest his soul. And he's like, yes, Lieutenant Ortiz. You know, and I was like, look, right here in Maccabees. And he's like, Maccabees? That's not scripture. And I'm like, well, no wonder you don't believe in purgatory, man. You just toss out the stuff that you don't like to, you don't want to believe in, right? You don't agree with. Get out. Okay. Fucking right to the president's office. Anyway, the entire semester was like that. After like the 4th or 5th time of getting kicked out of the class, the president's like, look, you're not here to prove your point. You're here to pass classes, and that's it. And I was like, come on, man. But I was like, I got no integrity with that. Like, I got to defend what I believe. And he's like, you don't have to believe it. You just have to do what you're told, and that's the way it works. And he's like, I get it. I understand. I've had a conversation with the chaplain to not challenge your beliefs in class. You know, like, okay, all right. Anyway, I think it was a 1-semester class because as an officer, we always ate at that school lunch during the week. Everybody attended lunch, mess 2, right? And everybody ate together. And this one day, sit down, and the teachers would always get in first and serve themselves, and then the students would march in. We'd say prayer, right? And the chaplain would always do the prayer. And the officers, the seniors were all officers. So I was an officer, and you always sit at the head of the table, and another officer or a teacher sits at the other head of the table. Or I happened to be sitting, I was facing this way, and the chaplain was sitting right here. And he made the invocation, and he said something to the effect of, and that we all would resist sin. And then we sat down, and I looked over at him, and I was like, he's got a big plate of food. And I was like, Chaplain. He's like, yeah. He's like, resist sin. He's like, yes, I'm glad you're paying attention. And I'm like, gluttony's a sin. Anyway, last day I saw that guy was at graduation, and I wanted to introduce my dad to him. And it was very cordial. My dad wasn't as big of a jerk as I am. We shook hands with the guy, and I said, Chaplain Waddell, if I don't see you before I die, I'll see you in purgatory. And he went from very happy to beet red. He was so mad. Anyway. So I graduated from there, went to Franciscan University, and felt free again. Like at that point. And by free, I don't mean like able to do what I want. I'm talking, or able to do what I'm supposed to. I'm talking about unfettered. Like the shackles are off. I'm out of military school. Party on, let's go. I never lost that sense of hedonism that I developed in Miami. I just found a way to structure my life so I could perform for the people that want, the dancing monkey stuff, and by doing what other people wanted me to do, I can do what I wanted to do. As long as I performed in that regards, whatever. And so when I got to student my freshman year, I think my claim to fame was that my GPA was lower than my blood alcohol content for at least the first semester. It was so bad. My partying was so bad that the last week of the first semester, one of my classmates came up to me. He's like, Ivan, are you going to the final? And I looked and I was like, dude, we don't have any classes together. And he's like, dude, we have a computer science class together. And I was like, what? Computer science? I literally like went for the first week and then missed it to the point that I forgot I even had the class. Like I just got so used to not being like, it just never entered my head and I forgot about it.
Yeah.
So I failed that class, obviously. And ironically, computer science is one of my strengths now, you know. So somehow in my sophomore year, my first semester, my sophomore year, like that whole freshman year was a disaster. But I managed to stick it out and make it to the next semester, make it to my second year. And some in the middle of my sophomore year, I just had a devastating blow to my ego and my social life. And I remember there was a moment I felt alone. And when you're in Steubenville, remember, it's like the entire culture, it's a very charismatic place. So it's everywhere, right? This is a whole school, the whole campus is, you know, seething with the faith, right? And for somebody just trying to get along, you know, it's irritating, you know. But I never devalued it. I just devalued the way it was presented. Like it just was irritating and too in your face and seemed insincere to me, seemed over the top, seemed unnecessary. But you take enough classes and you talk to enough people and you start seeing the glimmers of the value of the faith, right? And that was really, again, like my sophomore year. And I think what happened was I just paid attention once at Mass. I remember sitting there just feeling lonely and going to Mass by myself. I felt like my friends had abandoned me, you know, like there was a whole series of events that led up to it. And I went to Mass by myself, which was like 17 a day. So you can't miss an opportunity. And I paid attention to everything. I just said, there must be something here. And it was, when I talked to my dad later, it was a similar reality that he had faced, you know, like he had just spent his whole life focused on so many other things, you know, like he was an accomplished aeronautical engineer, you know, he was part of the design team of the F-14, you know, like he did all these crazy things. He designed rockets in California, you know, at Edwards Air Force Base, you know, like all these nutso things. I didn't even believe him about the F-14, and he produced a schematic after, like right before he died, and I was like, oh my gosh.
You can't just breeze over the fact that you just said your dad helped design the F-14.
Yeah, now, I mean, I'm sure there's like 300 people on a design crew, but he was there, you know, whether he was like important or just a kid running paper, he was there, you know. Anyway.
That's crazy.
And he knew things, man. I mean, heck, when we were kids, we'd go to Miami International Airport on the weekends because back then you could park next to the runways and stuff like that. I mean, not on the runway. You're literally outside the property. Mm-hmm. But there was a road that ran around the airport called Perimeter Road, and then there was a parking spot nearby. And this is all gone now that 9/11 or whatever. And we would sit there, and my dad would sit there with binoculars, and he would literally we'd have a game identify that plane from 10 miles away. You know, one engine on the back, 2 engines on the wings, all 10-11. Like, oh my gosh. So he was way into planes. The guy knew everything. But anyway, back to the faith story. And literally that was the moment. I mean, that was when it wasn't anything like monumental, nothing crazy. But at that point I realized if I'm going to carry this on, I've got to know what it means. I can't be like my dad and just do what I'm told, just follow the motions and do what everyone else is doing because I'm embarrassed. It's I got to know what it means. And that was the beauty of Steubenville. Is there's a little program there called Humanities and Catholic Culture. And the guy, Dr. Jim Gaston, was the advisor, the moderator, I don't know what it's called, the head of the department, right? And he actually just spoke at the last gala at the Chesterton, at the gala for Chesterton Academy. And he's kind of like a Renaissance man, but he's more like an educated mountain man. He's got a very gruff exterior, kind of presents a little like he's angry, he has that kind of curmudgeon-y kind of guy, until he started lecturing. And when he lectured, it was just brilliance, when I saw him, I was almost in tears, at the gala, because he just presented the faith and culture. He described there was a formula, right? And at the top was I, and then there was a slash, and then underneath was FWP. So it was idea, as it relates to folk, work, and place. And then that folk, work, and places is informed by the idea, turnarounds, and informs the idea itself. And the idea evolves over time. And just that's culture, right? It's a formula for culture, right? So you have these ideas of the way the world works, and you try to play it out in reality. And then reality kicks you in the teeth, and you're like, let's make some adjustments here, And it was crazy because that little thing has just gone through my head forever and ever, just constantly doing things. So you're like at my office 3 years ago when I showed up, the company's always been very solid, but the administrative staff was a disaster, right? They had gone through some significant changes, staff that came in, staff that left, so all this, a little bit of turnover at the administrative level. And even though transactionally everything was going great, like just, oh my gosh, what a mess, And you had an investment, a group of investors that came from overseas, and they left because the partnership ended. You had people retiring, so you had all this turnover and this new wave of people come in, and the transition and the succession didn't happen very well, But the owner and all the traders and everybody else that's there, they have enough operational knowledge of how everything worked that they just muscled it through. But again, that doesn't make you nimble. It doesn't make you. But as such, that administrative staff was frustrated as hell, and they were angry, and they were just constant fighting. And when I came aboard, I couldn't handle it. It's just not something I wanted. And I was like, we're going to change the culture here. And that's what I started to do, just remaining calm, introducing joy, just joy as joy of work as a principle, Anyway, so that IFWP thing infected that, and now, we enjoy going to work, It's stressful, it's hard work, it's crazy sometimes. We got a lot of things going on. Sometimes it's like getting hit by the fire hose, but it's fun, There's joy there, because we instituted that idea of joy 3 years ago, and even though not everybody has it, not everybody feels the same way I do. I get it. But it's definitely a more joyful place to work than it was 3 years ago, just by having that I there, and then FWPing it to death, anyway, so.
Would you say that that's something that you really learned more particular about, especially inside yourself, is that idea of joy at Franciscan?
No.
Or do you think that was kind of before?
No. I don't know.
People find joy. This is what we found on the podcast, is especially with a lot of conversion stories, is typically, a lot of people will say that they just felt something was really missing in their life until they found someone that they thought just exuded joy. And I don't know, maybe if you think that you kind of had a similar experience kind of going to Franciscan, because I can imagine military school being a very dreary place. It's fantastic in the way that it teaches you kind of that structure and discipline. But it's not really a place that would kind of exude joy.
Yeah, and negotiation in black markets.
Sure.
It's a very well-rounded students.
It was crazy what happened when half the kids are gone for the weekend, and all of a sudden you got this little group of goonies running around everywhere. Anyway, no. So it's the reason I pause is that I do remember in the last 10 years focusing on joy and making joy a significant thing. But going back to Steubenville, it was more of trying to find a way to unscrew up my life. And it wasn't an S word when I was using it back then. So I was more trying to figure out what rules I was breaking. What was I doing wrong? And I committed to that for a long time, but to stop doing bad things. And I don't know when the moment was that I realized it was okay, not having vices is a good thing, but it's not going to last. What virtues are you developing? How are you improving as a person? And I noticed back when I went to, military school, I had a significant amount of self-worth, confidence levels through the roof. I really felt better myself. And I realized that it was because I was accomplishing things. I was growing. I was becoming a better version of myself. I was moving more towards who God wanted me to be than what I had created for myself, what priorities I'd made. So Steubenville kind of helped me get a legalistic framework. The HEC program, it's more specifically gave me more of a cultural framework, but they never gave me a purpose. And that's what's been most difficult for everything, is just, why am I here?
Right.
All right. Now I know what God wanted. God's sake, Christ came and he, lived and taught and did all that, and then crucified, died, resurrected. I believe that stuff. Totally on board with that. That's cool. I still feel terrible. This sucks. But why? I don't know. Well, it sucked before, but now it sucks and I don't have any guilt. So that's okay. I don't like the guilt. The guilt sucks, And like I was saying before we got on, guilt is different for me. It's not a guilt of I feel ashamed of myself, never. Guilt is I didn't do that right. And I know it, and that's it. I know I did a wrong thing. But what's been difficult for me most of my life is that I don't feel shame. I don't feel like it's not an emotional thing for me. It's not a physical feeling. It's just I've learned so much about life that I know when it's wrong and I know when it's right. And that's the only thing that keeps me from doing it again, But as far as like, oh, I've done that wrong thing and now I feel bad that I did it. Nope. Doesn't ever enter my head, which is why my humor is the way it is, because I can find a way to make people laugh about anything, and I don't care, and no topic is off the table. So I've had to really fight hard to continuously combat that so I don't slip into some sort of like nihilism or atheism or agnosticism, like, well, if I don't feel it, then it doesn't matter, but it does matter, So that's why I go back to what you're saying about joy, is seeking joy as an end in of itself has been very important in the last 10 years. Seeking beauty, here's another part of that. So a lot of, especially in today's Protestantized Christian America, we talk about a personal relationship with Christ. Well, for me, that ain't happening. I can't tell you how many people, Mark Novakoski, he's a composer. He told me that from the very moment he experienced a relationship with Christ, he couldn't let go. And like he had a personal relationship with God from the time he had a conversion. And I'm like, sounds cool, And he's like, well, when did you have yours? And I'm like, never. There's no dude standing in front of me. Like if Christ physically appeared before me, I would rap onto that guy instantaneously. But the idea that I have to imagine his because there's no speaking to me, there's no hearing it in my head, there's no like going to Eucharistic adoration and just having this, and never had it, I don't deny it, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that's not been the experiential, part of my faith, Mm-hmm. It's just more my head informing my heart, and my heart saying, all right, I'm in, let's go, Yeah. So most of my faith journey has not been the person of God, but the philosophical concept of God, the essence of God. That's what I've pursued more than anything, is the essence of who God is. So God is a father, okay, pursuing perfect fatherhood, understanding fatherhood. God is goodness himself, understanding what perfect goodness is. And I'm going to go and try and model my life after that. God is love. I'm going to be loving as much as I can. I got to understand what true charity is, So that's been the entirety of my faith pursuit. And as much as I've longed for having that personal relationship, when Mother Teresa's desolation statements came out after her death, when she was talking about like feeling abandoned by God, I'm like, I felt that at the very beginning, and I'm like, so what? Doesn't matter. So I read about how she felt, and I was like, I've never felt that way. Not in the sense of like I never felt desolate. I just never cared. It's like, dude's not here. Of course he's not here. He died. It's like, so who cares? Like, you're not going to show up and have dinner with me. It's just that's how it is. It's like, so I never got attached to the idea of having a personal relationship with Christ, and I don't know why. And maybe I attribute it to like the Protestant thing, so I didn't think that was important, and maybe but that's it. I've been more of approaching the philosophical definitions of who God is. Not just philosophical, but theological definitions, mm-hmm. also. And just saying where that is, God's there, mm-hmm. And then really translating it into it, I have a lot of conversation, a lot of people who pride themselves on what they didn't do. And I'm like, well, the point is not. The point is to do.
Yeah.
The point is to create,
There's one of the guests that we had on before. I don't know if you've ever actually met him, Zach Taylor.
Isn't he a quarterback for
Zach Taylor? Actually, I think there is.
Has to be a quarterback.
But it sounds like a quarterback.
It does.
No, he brought up a really, really good. Actually, he and another guest that we had brought up a really good point about. This is relevant to what you're saying.
Sorry, you know what I did? I mixed up Zach Thomas and Jason Taylor, and they were teammates for the Dolphins. One was a defensive end, one was, and Jason Taylor played for the Akron Zips. Zach Thomas was a linebacker. Anyway,
but there is actually a guy whose name is Zach Taylor who is a quarterback. But he's like recent. I think he's in college right now.
Okay. Anyway, back to Zach.
Yeah, back to Zach.
To the idea of having that personal relationship, I think sometimes this is my experience. Because I think I experienced a very similar thing where I don't feel like I have this super personal relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that sometimes, I think that some people do experience that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that some people kind of almost, they romanticize it to the point where it's like they want it to happen because they want to be in control of their faith. Whereas this is something that I've learned. I haven't been a father for very long, but I have been a father for long enough to kind of realize, like, when you're a father to someone, you love them, you know, almost unconditionally most of the time, right? You want to guide them in ways that they don't understand, right? It's the same way that the Father views us as his children. We don't always understand what it is, right? You don't have that personal relationship with your father in the same way that you have a personal relationship with a friend or something like that.
Right.
Because they guide you, the Father guides you in ways that you won't ultimately understand. And sometimes that's really just not knowing him, right?
That is such a deep topic. I was literally just talking to a friend today about, his son is my nephew, right? Mm-hmm. And he's not my brother. He's not my brother-in-law. Long story. Anyway, so his son had some issue happen, and he was going to go do something that was not the best idea. And I just said, yeah, but here's how you make sure you don't get yourself killed doing something stupid. Because I'm his uncle, right? And so he's like, so I was talking to this guy who is his father, and he says, what? What did you do? And I said, look, man, I would never say that to my kids, right? But there is never going to be a moment in your son's life where he's going to think of his ideal man and think of me, because I'm his uncle. But he is going to come to me for advice. He's going to come to me for help. He is going to ask me to do a lot of things, all right? So me keeping that door open and just guiding him and nudging him or whatever, inconsequential. Now, I'm not going to encourage him to do bad things, right? That's not it. But if he's going to do something stupid and he's wet on it, it's not my role to say, don't you dare, right? That's the role of the father, right? But it is my role to say, look, if you're going to do something stupid, don't have it have long-lasting consequences, or nudge him back in the right direction. Do a good thing. I said, but here's the difference. You as a father, you are required to uphold that vision of perfection for him, because when he sits down and contemplates God, it's you he thinks about, no matter what. And this has been just been proven true so many times over and over again. Even the atheists, when I ask them to describe what they think God is, and they love to describe this God that's gone and everything like that, I was like, all right, I'm going to describe your dad. It's the same thing. Over and over and over and over and over, right? So that was the whole point. Like, you go back to fatherhood. It's so important that as a dad, and that's what I learned having kids, is that it's so important for me to be a vision of God to my children. But how do you do that when you're a screwed up wackadoo, who's pretty much pissed on everything he's done in his life? And how do you hold them to a higher standard? Well, you've got to tell them. You've got to be honest with them. I am a screwed up, broken wacko who's done all sorts of stupid things. And I've learned a lot of great lessons from that. So you listen to me, and I will point you to God. I'm not God. I'm nothing like God. All right. There are aspects of me that reflect God, but I'm not that guy. And that's kind of how I framed my parenthood or my fatherhood, is a sense of being the messenger for my kids, and try to exhibit that virtue in as much as I can, but knowing full well, like right off the bat from the very beginning, I'm going to fail. So I have to account for my failures immediately. I can't just pretend like, oh, God's going to take care of it, Well, he is, through me. The way I approach my failures and the way I bring myself back to God is going to inform these kids, So my dad wasn't exactly a loving guy, an approachable guy, right? Not because he was cruel and cold and callous, but because he was conflicted and distracted and dealing with his own relationship with his dad. That was a disaster, right? So how do I build that bridge? How do I build a bridge where my kids can talk to me and listen to me? But at the same time, I don't want to be the guy who's like a total, hedonist and party with my kids and drinking all night, and give them the sense that God's this, like, who cares? We're just going to party, Again, I've got to build an image that's worthwhile, So, so that they have something to look forward to. It's not just so that I can look good in front of my kids. It's not the image part of it. It's the idea that they have to have something that they want to build towards, that they want to be like, right? Mm-hmm. And it better reflect God, or they're just going to, all I have is like a bunch of little a little slaves, you know, I got my own little cult going on, you know.
That's why you have so many kids.
Yeah. Well, mostly because I need the dishes done.
Yeah, it stacks up. It really does. What I really liked what you said is like that honesty and openness. Like I am not perfect. I have screwed up. That's like when my dad and I relationship, it was like a lot of sports growing up. Mm-hmm. Sports, it was awesome. I loved it, but it wasn't at that deep spiritual level. And then once we were able to open up, talk about our wounds and kind of say, hey, this is where I started. This is where I'm going. This is how I got there. Yeah. That's when that relationship started to actually like form.
Yep.
And it's a lot of respect, and say, okay, if you could do it, I can do it, and I can do it better.
And that's the hard thing is that, you know, and it's why I don't share details of my sin growing up. I mean, I remember my son asked me one time, like, hey, Dad, did you ever do this thing? And at the moment I was like, if I tell him I did and I didn't, then I'm a liar. If I tell him I didn't and I did, I'm also a liar. And if I did do that bad thing and I tell him, yes, I did, and now I don't do it anymore, was that going to give him the message that, oh, well, Dad did and got away with it, and he's fine now, so let me go give it a shot, you know? And it applies to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, he was like 15 or 16 at the time, and I said, you know what? Who cares? I said, is it something you want to do? Is that something that you think is going to be who you need to be? Is that's going to be an aspect of who you are and defines who you are as a person 10, 20, 30 years for eternity? Is that thing? He's like, no, of course not. I said, so why do you care? It doesn't matter. What you should be asking me is, Dad, how did you, and then you think of all the things that you see me do well. And you think, man, my dad is really good at that. I want to learn how to do that. You say, Dad, can you teach me how to do that? How'd you learn how to do that? And build on my successes. Don't try and like find some, you know, sniveling little like, leering way of like, oh my gosh, he did something bad. And I was like, yeah, we could do that all night long. You know, that's fun at a bar. Who cares? And I can tell you stories, make you laugh, you know? Mm-hmm. I said, but you're my son. I don't want you to be my failures.
Yeah.
I don't want you to try and, you know, do my failures better than me. I don't want you to try and recover from my failures, because here's a problem. I'm 49 years old. There's crap that I'm still dragging that I did when I was 12 or 13, or I started doing when I was 12 or 13 or 14 or 8 or 2 or 17 or 24. You never break away from it. Some things get so ingrained in you, you can't stop. Why get that freight train going? Yeah. So if you're going to start building actions, right? Building ideas, you know, you have this opportunity to work with God, who's already written on your heart what he wants you to be, right? You just got to find it. So you have this opportunity. You're this young 15, 16-year-old kid. You can design all this with God's help, right? Your life, this big, giant, you know, maybe 70 years of life that you get to canvas, that you get to draw on and build on. What are you going to do with it? Design that. Work towards that. Every day, build up, build up, build up, build up. And the problem is that he's in the state is like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, wait, how about do something?
Yeah.
Find something good, right? So that's one of the things I've told my kids, like, forget the college stuff. You know, like, it doesn't make any sense. You know, 20 years ago, when you could pay $10,000 a year for college and come out and get a $30,000 a year job, all right, so you're $40,000 in debt. You got a $30,000 a year job. Maybe you set aside 5-10%. You know, it'll take 10, 15 years to pay it all off. It's over. Now it's like you're coming out of college with $150,000, $200,000 in debt. Same $30,000 a year job, right? Sitting around with kids who also don't have a college degree, so now they're in the same spot you are without a degree. You know, and I was like, "Where's the ROI?" You know,
there's not.
And there's some things that, you know, it doesn't matter how much you're worth, you know, but at some point you have to be. You can't just ignore the economics of things, right? Like there's even scripture about, like, you know, when you go to build a house, you don't just, you have a design, you have a plan, you know, you don't just go and try and build it because you run out of money, right? So there is an objective good behind, you know, being concerned about the economics of things. It's not the most important thing, right? Because God owns all the money. So when he wants you to do something, you just go do it, you know? So if my kids come say, Dad, I prayed, God wants me to do this, they're probably lying because they're good at scamming. I'm totally kidding. No, but if there's a sincere feeling that God's calling them to do something that seems economically foolhardy, you have to contemplate that, you know, building the ark, right? Why are you doing that? That's dumb, you know? And then it rained, not so dumb. Yeah. But yeah, just so helping the kids learn how to build. And if you don't know what to build, find something to build that's either moot or, God willing, something of value, of positive value,
Yeah.
so that they can learn those processes, those structures, those ideas that go into it. And then the other thing too is that most of what we do with kids today is shield them from experiential knowledge of suffering. Like, we do so much to make sure kids don't suffer. And it's the biggest disservice we do to kids now. Kids can't work. They can't do dangerous things. They can't do scary things. They can't watch scary things. Oh my God, kids saw somebody die in a movie. Well, you roll back the clock 200 years ago, the kids were watching people drop dead all around them. You don't think that, the people that grew up in these war-torn places, do they have no chance of being happy?
Yeah.
They see people drop dead all over the place, bullets ahead, all sorts of chaos going on.
Someone, I saw a tweet one time that was like,
I'm not trying to say that that's the best way to do
No,
it.
yeah.
I'm just saying that we get too scared about all the real ways that life happens and pretending that getting rid of all that stuff is going to make people happy.
No, there's
and we're living in the most depressed age of time.
Well, I was going to say, there's a true desensitization that has gone on for the last 30 years. I saw a tweet one time that just said that, you brought all these kids up in the 90s on Disney movies, Disney princesses, happy endings. What did you expect? Now they all have anxiety, depression.
Yeah, life still happens.
That still happens.
Yeah, but it's striking, like, I tell people, like, one of my philosophies of parenting is to give my kids enough trauma that they can grow from it, like they learn how to deal with it, but not so much that it injures them, right? And I say trauma just as a
term, right?
Yeah, as a placeholder for stress, difficulty, challenges, all those different things, but when you talk about in psychological terms, it's always trauma.
Yeah.
But we act like it's all bad, and to avoid it is the ultimate. And no, it's not the ultimate. You can avoid it. Pain, misery, suffering is uncontrollable, right? Now, as a good person, as a Christian, you don't try and cause pain and suffering for other people, but you do need to learn how to deal with it, And, like we talk about violence, like it's intrinsically evil. And yet, when Christ was violent in the temple, everybody seems to pretend like that didn't happen, There was some idiot the other day be like, oh, but he only whipped the animals. Oh, so animals are good for violence. You can be violent to animals. That's okay. So, like I look at all these people who are like, non-violent people. No, I'm against violence. No, you're not. Because if you claim that you're against violence and you're not going to use violence, okay, then you know what's going to happen. A violent person will shove you aside and go do whatever the hell they want. And while you sit there and be like, please don't, all this violence gets promoted through the world, right? While you sit there and say, well, I'm non-violent. And then as violence wrecks everything around you while you sit on the sidelines and pretend that you're against violence, right? And try to convince everybody you're against violence, what you really are is just in favor of someone else doing violence. And you support it wholeheartedly.
Outsource your violence.
It's not even outsource. You just would rather everybody else do violent and just pretend like you're not guilty. Yeah. So by you sitting on the sidelines and being like, I am holier than you, so I won't do violence. And then, of course, you watch the violence. At some point, you got to fight, Yeah. If you're going to protect a child or whatever. But, there's these really deluded nonviolent people or anti-violent or whatever the hell you want to call it. Peaceniks. Yeah. And people are dying all around them, and they're like, but I'm not going to pick up a gun.
Yeah, I think people get really stuck with, like, they want this, like, ideal world.
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. I wish it did. I really did. I wish we can give everyone all the money they can have, and no one's homeless. Everyone wants that.
But what happens when people do that?
We get greedy, and then it doesn't work because there's humans.
Because there's a process to everything, and when you try and go outside the process, it damages people.
Yes,
the process of suffering, and slaving, and striving, and working hard, and failing, and growing. Now, even though a lot of that suffering part, the negative aspect of it, is from original sin, right? The feeling of it, right? The emotional side of it is where original sin got us. But look around. God didn't just, trees. Need a new tree. Poof, new tree, Seeds that erupt out of their, plants that erupt out of their seed casings, grow through this and die and wither because they didn't make it because there wasn't enough sun. And then another seed pops. Like, you watch all of nature. It's nothing but violence everywhere. It's so violent all over the place. So I'm like on a term now where I'm like, violence is intrinsically good. Forget about it. It's just a necessary evil, or that it's a moot point. I think violence is intrinsically good, right? But what we've done with violence, right, and this is where Christ teaches against it, right, is that we've used violence for us. This violence is for me. I want to take power. I'm going to hurt that man so I can get what I want, right? Whereas when you look at Christ and the way he introduced violence, look inward first. You know, when you go and say, take the plank out of your own eye, violence, right? So that, not before, but so that you can better remove the speck from your brother's eye. Also violent. But if you can take a plank out of your eye, then when you go up to your brother's eye and instead of like doing all that silliness and you're just like, because you want to do the least amount of violence necessary. But now that you've done violence within to your sin and to your, you know, bad desires and all that other stuff, your licentiousness, all that stuff. So you take then the violence of discipline within. That's the extraordinary violence that he wants from us. He just wants us to take the focus out of violence externally. Just forget about that. Get inside of you. Do violence to this thing first. Yeah. Because from there you can create love. Because you control all that violence or you use that violence against your evil desires, right? Your selfish desires, your power desires. Then you go and do things for others. Yeah. That's when you become selfless. Because you control that
intention that's driven inside, dying unto oneself in order for something else to come, right? The Holy Spirit, for example. Yeah, I really liked it because that idea, at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about artistry and modern artistry. And you were talking about how, you know, you can kind of see in modern art, like in some aspects, you can see where the beauty is coming from, not necessarily by what your eyes are seeing, but what your brain is understanding, that the artist is trying to portray some type of intentionality, right?
Correct.
Because intentionality is always the beginning to the start of something. Can't start well without intentionality behind it.
Agreed.
Right? It's the idea
try
of right? or try. I think intentionality. I think that really is the key term, though. With, like, for example, like we talked about the Notre Dame, putting down that first brick, signing the order to put that thing. That is a big sign of intent. When you can't start anything good. Maybe that is a good sign for modern art, because we do have these like glimpses of hope that artists do have intentionality. Because for a long time in poetry, literature, even movies to a certain extent, there was no intent that was being formed into the art that was being created, right? Okay. The whole idea of annihilationism or deprecationism in art or something like that was to just do it without as much intentionality as possible. Have you ever read, have you ever heard of Camus, Albert Camus?
No.
So he wrote a book. It's a postmodern book. It's terrible, but it is really bad. It starts off with
but it's always great when you can read terrible things or look at terrible art and hear terrible stories and do all sorts of terrible things and learn good things from it.
Yes.
I love it. That is clouded. Every cloud is a silver lining is one of my favorite things in life, man.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole book, it's supposed to be about this guy that really, truly does not have intent in his life. And he just has a terrible life.
Bumps and bounces like a cork in the ocean.
Exactly. Yeah, he bumps, he bounces. He's a true modern man, right? He's not driven towards any one goal. His life just sucks, though.
Yeah.
The first line of the book is, "Today my mother
purpose-free."
Died.
Today what?
Today my mother died, and I wasn't sad about it. That's the first line of the book. And isn't that like, it's like the perfect characterization of like modern society?
You know, the funny, you're completely right, and it's funny you say that, because it's like, I think about so many things that I've experienced that are wrong. Right? Like, you know, this person died and I couldn't care less, you know, heck, I might've been happy about it, you know? And to me, I know that might not be the right answer to certain things, but what's interesting is I know why I feel that way. Like the intention, so I like that word about intentionality, and that, to me, it's purpose, right? Like you act with purpose, and so many people don't have a purpose. Like their only purpose, the only thing they can examine from the modern level is what the narrative tells them to do, right? Like there's this overarching narrative of what success means. You know, go to school, go to college, get a job, save money, buy a house, have a kid maybe, or have dogs. You know, like there's all these different things. And when you look at how it's all structured and how we've composed this narrative, it's all self-serving. Everything is about making you happy. And as such, everything in this society, all the advertisements, everything is always seeking your own personal comfort, your own satisfaction, your own consumption, everything. But as soon as you're done, it's all gone. And you'll be long and instantly forgotten. And you think about the people you've known in your life who were very hedonistic and very much about themselves, and all they may have been entertaining at the moment, when things get serious, you don't even think about them. The people you think about are the stalwarts, the people who work hard, the people who trudge along day in, day out. They build and they build and they build and they build and they build. And, you know, what everybody else wants to call them, well, you're just obsessed with that thing, you know. And then when the rains come and the floods start washing in, Noah, let me in, you know. Sorry, buddy. You know, it's like, that's not the way it works, you know. But intentionality, right? Like, you have to have that vision. And going back to, again, the church thing, I can't imagine that they laid down the foundation of those churches and were like, all right, we're done.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, this foundation is terrible. What were we thinking? It should be here. Oh, yeah, it should be here. Oh, we should move this here. Oh, and what about this? Oh, yeah, let's do it. Like, I just see these people, like, start developing, and they probably started with, like, we'll just build a little church because there's only 100 of us. While this church is going to be finished in 500 years, oh, my gosh, we better make it bigger. You know, and somebody's kicking it wide and all that other stuff. Who knows how these things started, but they saw every day, this is a big problem with modern society, and I see with even my kids, who I try to make them learn to work hard. Everything is so automated now, they never see the process behind anything. So if they don't know how to do it, they don't know how to learn to do it, because they've never watched anyone do the process. The only thing involved with the process is this.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to talk to your friends? You need to order food? You need to look up a song?
Yeah. It's part of the reason.
Everything, every single thing we do. You need to order plants. Everything we do on every single aspect of our day is. Yeah. So how is cooking food different than composing a song, than painting a painting?
Yeah.
You know? Oh, no, just AI does it. You know, everything's automatic. Yeah. So you don't ever see or witness any part of the process individually separated. Maybe they're separating. Like, maybe you walk in on your father as a painter, and he's halfway done with the painting he's doing, and you're seeing him just do, but you never saw him do the pencil sketches, right? Mm-hmm. You never saw him make the frame, right? Or maybe you're older and you see him do that, or you see this, and you start seeing all these different aspects of it, and then you engage that process for some reason. You want to do it yourself, and as you try and fail, all these little things that you witnessed your dad or maybe others doing, you start piecing it together, and you start making these links, and all these different disjointed memories that you have of watching those different aspects of the process, all of a sudden they all start flowing together. But what now? How do I teach my kids how to use Excel?
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
YouTube video.
Just make a YouTube video, right?
Yeah.
It's all disconnected, right?
Yeah.
And so you have kids now. Here's another crazy thing. Our interactions as children, right? If you look at how babies, and you have a baby now, like, the first thing they want to do is like, in their mouth, you know? Well, why? Because all of your most sensitive areas of your mouth are in your tongue, or in your body, or in your tongue. The most sensitive parts of your body are your tongue. And so, like, there's this interesting phenomenon that no matter what surface you look at, even if you've never licked it before, you know exactly what it feels like to lick it. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to lick it. You just know. Like, if you looked at the microphone, you know exactly what it would feel on your tongue. You've never licked it before, but you know it. Well, that's how you learned as a baby, right? Yeah. And then as you start moving around, because your hands and your feet are mostly for motion, or for, you know, just they're useless until a point, or feeding or whatever, as you move and you start touching things and all that stuff, that is how you start learning. You don't learn by sitting down and reading a book and it's like, oh, 2 + 2 is 4. No, you start by putting things in your mouth. You start by feeling pain. You start by screaming for mom. You know, like, all these different things. You interact physically with the world, and the world informs you what the response is. And then your brain starts to remember, and you start to develop and all this other stuff. But now you're giving kids phones and tablets at such a young age that the only real physical interaction, they're not running outside and swinging sticks. Yeah. They're touching glass all day long, the smooth surface.
It's the dimension.
It's all they know.
Yeah.
And I was reading a study within the last year. I don't remember what it was. And they've compared, now that they have a full course of children who grew up with nothing but screens, and these kids who've been educated by computers, and they study their brains, and we're talking full-on brain damage. Like, no head injuries, nothing like that. They just used exclusively screens. They found a cohort of kids who grew up using nothing but screens as learning tools. No books, no pencils, no pens, nothing, just screens. And when they studied their brains, they were brain damaged. like they had smooth brains and all that other stuff. You never heard that? Like no torture.
I think I've actually seen the same study.
And it was devastating. And now people are like waking up to the fact that, technology should make things maybe easier or possible, but not replace.
It's a tool.
It's a tool.
And we're not using it as a tool. We're using it as God, is everything. And that's a big issue. Because we're lucky, we're fortunate. We grew up before we got cell phones in like high school. So we got to go play with sticks, go touch dirt, all of those things. And
homeschooling was a big part of that too.
Homeschooling was a huge part. And something I wanted to mention too is Montessori schools. Mm-hmm. I know that your wife, she teaches one, or
so she is a certified Montessori teacher. And this is a sticky subject because, I've always wanted her to have her own Montessori school. But, sales isn't her big thing, right? So, unfortunately, like her community is all homeschooling people. And what's the one thing we know about homeschooling families? They're cheap. So, no, Montessori is an incredible system of thought. Now, what is Montessori not? It's not just leaving a kid, feral. They're not like,
Can you explain what a Montessori school is?
To a certain degree, and I wouldn't call myself an expert, so I'm going to be using what I've gleaned from it, from the side. You want to explain, Nate? So starting with what it's not. It's not just feral kids running around and discovering the world on their own, right? It's not free-range children or any other silliness. Maria Montessori significantly understood the way children would learn and codified it in a way that probably no one else ever has, right? And she studied when children have sensitivities to certain things, like sensitivity to language or sensitivity to order or, all these different things. And she realized that they came in a succession, right? Like this would happen, then that would happen. And so, the age range might have been a little bit off, but there's an overlap and there's a progression to it. And so I've learned just from watching and listening to Christine talk about things, like there's a lot of principles of Montessori that I know, but I couldn't tell you exactly the philosophy of it.
Sure.
But I can give you examples, right? So for example, one of the things that Maria Montessori understood about children is that the utmost to them was to be like their parents. Like as soon as they, like these are the two, right? Like these are the pinnacle of who they are, right? So you have little baby, mom and dad, that's what they aspire to be. I want to be that, especially if it's a pleasing environment. It's not an abusive situation, right? Let's just talk about a normal, non-abusive reality. So Maria Montessori realized that most kids always would get in trouble or break or fall or fail trying to do adult things in a kid-sized body. I'm going to go get a glass from on this giant table on this big glass. And they pour it all over themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So she said, if you have an environment that's built for kids to do adult things, then they'll learn to do adult things. And if you have this expectation that children are in these moronic imbeciles, right? And they won't be capable of being adults until they're 18, which is, again, an arbitrary number. But you focus on the number one role you have as a parent is to raise that kid into an adult, right? So we raise adults, not kids. And it deviates entirely from our current society because our current society wants nothing more than to protect that childhood fun. What is it? It's hedonism. They want their kids to be hedonistic for as long as they can until somebody expects something of them. And then what happens when they're expected of? Well, now they can't even, period. They can't even, right? So Maria Montessori said, no, it's totally fine expecting from kids, but there has to be a progression to it and a limit to it and then an understanding. So when you walk into a Montessori classroom, it's just a miniature world, right? And there is a progression with how you teach the kids each thing and how they go from learning that thing, which sets a foundation for learning that thing, which sets a foundation for learning that thing, roll, crawl, toddle, walk, run, it's like the same progression.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, and again, I can't really summarize it because it's not my world.
No, it makes sense. I think the way that you said that it's, basically teaching kids to just better mirror what they want to do. Essentially, right? That seems to be the encapsulating.
To be adults.
Yeah.
To grow up as, to grow in skill, to be like the adults that they model after, right?
Yeah.
So, that's been one of the things. So Christine has been doing this for a long time. She did it in the framework of homeschooling, but I've always wanted her to have a a Montessori school, but sales again is not her thing. So it's just been like, go out there and hunt for students. It's like
there's this like study that came out. It was like 5 out of the 6 like billionaires, like tech billionaires, all went to Montessori school.
Oh
yeah, and
it's 5. Oh, as a ratio.
Yeah, like it was like Zuckerberg, all those types of guys. And it was just nuts.
Don't stop there.
Yeah.
It's not just tech billionaires. It's everything and everyone. When you start seeing how just that foundation being laid, at 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old, what that does for the rest of their life,
it's insane.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. Any psychology class, even Jordan Peters talks about, like those formative years, they're making so many connections, and if you need to make as many as you possibly can, so that they can be full humans. Like, I love what you said. I wanted to say it too earlier. It was, you're not raising kids, you're raising adults.
Right.
And at the end of the, it's not easy. Like, you want your kid to have a good, fun life. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, that's not reality.
But it's not supposed to be good fun. It's joy, right? So I can be in the middle of a desert suffering my tail off and find joy there, right? Or I could be on a motorcycle ride across the country and find joy, right? Or the opposite.
Work at high.
I could be in my favorite place of all time, be completely miserable, right? But it's just that mindset, right? Like, you take out of it what you will. If you want this to be miserable, it will. Like I said, some people come into my office and they want, hey, this sucks, it's terrible. I come in, I'm like, we're building. I have complete autonomy. I can do whatever I want. I cannot wait to get to work in the morning.
Yeah.
We're going to go build some cool stuff. Like, I can't wait. This is so great.
You know what I think it really is that it goes back to that key word that we were using before with intentionality. Because intentionality, it's the central core to everything good that you're going to do in life, but it's also the central core to everything you're going to do badly in life, right? Like, mortal sin, one of the big definitions of mortal sin is that you need to have full intentionality to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's clear that intentionality, though that it is very good and very important, it's not the core function that you need in order to experience joy. There has to be that continued progression of it. It needs to be perseverant, right? I think a lot of people you'll find are like extremely joyful because they have true perseverance of a goal that they have in life. Like you were saying with that whole thing, like, we're building something at work. We're persevering towards, an objective, a goal, the summit of the mountain.
So when you think about Christ, right? In the beginning was the Word, right? You talk about, and even Jordan Peterson talks about the Logos, right? The Word. It was an idea. It's a spirit. I mean, before matter was, there was God. God created matter. God created the physical world. The physical world didn't exist before, until God created it. And God being eternal, God was of physical nothing, because it wasn't something until God created the thing, right? This is incredibly unbelievable, hard to understand stuff, right? Like, how can that be? How can something be forever? Well, it can't be forever. It just never wasn't. It's like, that's the joy, man, because that's
right.
deep.
It's really cool. It doesn't have an origin. It's just pure intentionality.
It's pure intention. It's pure idea. It's pure word. It's pure logos. It's all these things that are just
pure.
And then you think about your life, right? Everything that you've done, everywhere that you are, all the things that you see started as a thought in someone's head or your own head, right? But this is the interesting thing about vice and virtue, is they both start as a thought. They both start in the same place, right? And then that thought, turns into concepts. You flesh it out a little bit, and then you take an action. And then that action consistently becomes a habit. And that habit, in turn, becomes a virtue, right? And then in turn, as that virtue develops and becomes who you are, defines you. It's not just something you're known for. It is who you are, and becomes your character, right? So that's, and the same thing goes off the rails into vice, right? So the same thought goes into bad actions or sin and bad habit, and then into a vice, and then into condemnation, right? And you think about like going back to like the philosophical and theological definitions of God. I do the same thing with heaven and hell, right? People are always like, oh, there's no heaven and hell. Are you miserable? Are you happy? But there you are. Yeah. You just disproved heaven and hell. Yeah. Because that's what it is. Heaven is pure happiness. Hell is pure misery. That's it. It's a simple concept. And if you believe in those two things, you believe in heaven and hell. So that's why suicide is an insanity. Because you have this sense that my misery will end when I kill myself. But if you believe in the immortality of the soul, now all you've done is taken your soul's ability away, or taking away your soul's ability to do good things. Because you have no physical world for which to do things, and especially for others, now you're alone. So yeah, that intentionality. And when we take that intentionality and our purpose and we shove it within ourselves, if we're shoving it within ourselves to satisfy ourselves, we never are satisfied. It's never possible.
Yeah.
But even people who selfishly serve other people gain satisfaction, because no matter how selfishly you try to do something for others, it's always going to be good for other people. And so that's why bad people get away with good things get away with bad things because they're doing it for good. There's some benefit that comes out of it, But that intentionality, that purpose, God acted with purpose. God acted in intentionality when He created the world, everything we do. And when we sit there and we have nothing, I don't do anything.
Yeah.
They would lose our purpose and they have no intention to do anything.
But even if you do something because someone else tells you, how Christ talks about like how to be a good slave, It's not because slavery is good and who cares. How do you make the best of that? Okay, you're a slave. You can't get out of it. That's what He's saying. He's just saying, okay, you've defined yourself as a slave. Here's how to be a good one. All right? But then again, when you look at why slavery ended, it's because of the Christian West. Why are we enslaving these people? We're free. We're autonomous. We get to live out God's demand for us on our own without anyone telling us to do it. Maybe they should have the same opportunity. Oh, boy, we got to start this abolition movement and get it on fast track because this is stupid. Yeah. They're not animals. These are people. And no matter, and again, we in this country like to look at slavery only from a racial perspective, but it's not. It's a spiritual issue, right? It's an economic issue, right? It's how do I drive down wages so that I can get better production out of this crew? Yeah. It's what it is, right? That it took a racial tone in the United States, okay, but that's not, when you think about, black owned or black slave owners, okay, now what? Where's your racial argument go? It defeats that argument. But again, it's not to downplay the racial aspect of slavery in the United States. It's just more to say, hey, yes, absolutely, but that's a portion of it. Keep going.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to solve it by just saying pitting races against each other.
No.
So there's no way you solve slavery by saying, okay, we're going to take care of these people who are oppressed, and then we're going to do it by oppressing other people, right? The Marxist, ideal. Well, what's going to happen to those people who you're oppressing now in revenge? They're going to be the oppressed, and you're going to become the oppressor, and then at some point they're going to turn the tides, and now you're going to be flipping it around again. Yeah, and now the misery you were trying to prevent is now becoming your misery again. So why not find a better way? How about forgiveness, reconciliation, service through sacrifice? That's for everybody.
Yeah.
And the more you do that, and the more that cycle repeats itself, show me the damage done. The more you persist, or the more sacrifice and service to others persists in this culture, where have we seen that go south and create chaos? It doesn't. Because as soon as someone sees something problematic happen, they want to help.
Yeah.
But in the other world, in the capitalist world, in the consumerist world, right? When something bothers me, I retreat and I go to my cave and I soothe myself, and I either drink my drink, or I smoke my smoke, or I watch what I watch, or all these different things. It's not I feel terrible, I should help somebody. That never crosses the modern mind. Because I have no intention to help. And it never was my intention to help. It was all my intention to, hey, I'll trade this time, you give me money, and I'm going to get me. I can get what I want. I'm going to serve me.
But it's almost getting to the point where now the intention is to just be totally counter that virtuous person. Like, to me, it almost seems like nowadays because I think to a certain extent, I think you're right in the idea that people would rather just retreat into comfort But I think now that the world is becoming so perverse that you are actually getting into the realms of, no, I choose to do this wrong because I am in rebellion to something that the patriarchy or that the West has just always commonly held as good, right?
So 25 years ago, I was sitting down, I was working in Naples, Florida, doing construction, working for a construction company. And this is when the internet was just starting to become like globally connected, right? Like it was stable enough that you start learning about things happening around the world, right? With consistency. It wasn't like just some like weekly newsletter you got like, oh my gosh, look at that happen. There was a 24-hour news cycle. That's where it started, right? So instead of just watching the news at 5 or 5:30 or maybe the 11 o'clock, right, which is how it was before you guys were born probably, you can get news globally from anywhere around the world at any time, right? With the exception of maybe some severely impoverished countries or, maybe some cultural restrictions or whatever. And there's a woman in England that was paralyzed and she was fighting for her right to kill herself. Okay? She was fighting for euthanasia. At which point I learned that euthanasia wasn't about kids in China. And, yeah, it was a joke. Anyways. So, and I learned how it was actually spelled, which is really funny. Anyway, so I'm watching this whole thing happen. I feel terrible. I'm like, my gosh, this lady wants to kill herself. She's like literally totally quadriplegic, immobile. I mean, she's like in the Stephen Hawking phase where I think she could speak, but I wasn't sure if she had to like speak through somebody else or something like that. Anyway, I'm watching this whole thing and then I hear her talk before Parliament or whatever. Like she had to give testimony to somebody somewhere. She's like, I cannot do anything for anyone in this body. And then it hit me. I'm sitting in Naples, Florida, listening to the plight of a woman in London, England. I'm hearing her message to kill herself, but she's having a profound effect on me at that moment across the world, right? And I'm like, you don't even see. You're fighting for everyone to be able to kill themselves. What if you turned your attention on something else? Like you literally are being listened to because of your injury. Mm-hmm. But your attention is to end it and to take this thing that you see as a prison, right? And again, using Stephen Hawking as an example, this guy turned it into brilliance. Like the dude can't move and he's talking through a computer. I want to listen to him. That's cool, Yeah. Like, and this lady wanted to take, she had all that and she's like, so I should die because this is terrible. But yet she's moving the world. I mean, not for a good cause, but again, that was a cause. That was an intention. So I looked at that. I was like, wow, what if her motivations were to save people, to teach people how she, with her own failings or her own limitations, could reach everybody.
Yeah.
But again, going back to what I was saying, now we're going to start knocking off people because they're paraplegic and convincing them that they're useless, right? Or we're going to go now turn around and say, hey, Steven, cool and all with the computer thing, but dude, you're useless. Look at your body.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that you came up with one of the most brilliant astrophysiological whatever. Go away. You're useless. Is that what we want to convince these people? Mm-hmm. No. But that's what we're saying when we say, okay, your life, because of this aspect of your life, doesn't work as normal. You should die. It's all intention. Where are you directing it?
Yeah. Well, we talked about it on another podcast. Is how like humans, we think here. We think of just what's going on right now in my life. Yes. We don't think about the big picture. We don't think about eternity, especially if you don't have like that. If you're not Catholic, Christian, when you have that aspect of heaven, it's like nothing means nothing. It's like why be in pain right now? It's just going to end like that, and then I'll be in nothingness forever.
Because there's no. What's the purpose of suffering?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you don't have purpose of suffering, then it's just end it.
Avoid the hell out of it.
Yeah. And that's where a question I kind of have right now is we're kind of discussing these topics, and it's the world's in a really weird place. We all can agree on that. How do we start to solve that? How can we start to fix it? Especially you're doing it right now with your kids. You're doing something that's different. You're like, okay, this is what I did. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to do better, and you're kind of ingraining in them. Yeah, that next generation, getting that better. But what is something you can say to people to just kind of get them out of that thinking, finding that purpose, actually being intentional in the right kind of direction?
That's lack of intention right there. So he's like, me?
He's like, me?
It's a fascinating concept because it's so complicated but so simple. And the reason why it's complicated is because you're trying to reach everybody at the same time and give some sort of motivational, but the reality is they've already have it, right? So if we go back and we believe what Scripture's telling, or God's telling us through Scripture, and we believe that His call for us is written on our hearts, what are we avoiding, right? What is it that we already know we should do that we're not doing? Everybody has that. There's not a single person you talk to, they're like, oh yeah, I was supposed to go to the gym, but I got tired. Everyone's avoiding something. Their hearts are screaming at them to go do it. They don't have the discipline, right? Everybody's waiting for the motivation, but we all know motivation's fleeting, right? Mm-hmm. Motivation is garbage, right? Because you're more likely to have the motivation to do something bad, or self-destructive than you will to do anything good, right? So again, we talk about like proof that God exists. Well, this is proof that the devil exists, right? Because everything that sucks for you is the most fun, right? Everything that'll destroy you is so much fun. That food tastes the best, and it makes me fat. It gives me diabetes. But those satisfactions, that taste is temporary. It's only while you eat, and then you feel it hang on you for the rest of the day. But the beauty of virtue is that it's always persistently satisfying, and that it's always moving you forward to the next thing. I love using exercise and workout as an analogy because every single person in the world has at least tried to exercise, or maybe even accidentally exercised because they got chased by a bear or something. And so they understand immediately, number one, if they haven't exercised before or they're low exercise, immediately how badly they've done. Yes. Right? Their guilt and shame is instantaneous, right? Especially when that bear is chasing you and you're out of breath and you're stumbling and, you can't make it. So working out shows us, and this is a part of like theology of the body that I really had a lot of affinity for, because it really is analogous to the spiritual activity that we're trying to do, the spiritual exercise that we're trying to go through. It hurts to start, right? Do it anyway. I've never been to the gym. If I've ever gone to the gym for more than 5 minutes, it's always been an hour. I've never started working out, gotten 5 minutes in, and walked away because I was like, If I get in, have my routine, and hit it hard. Now, if I have no plan, I'm wandering around like, no. But if I have my plan and I go and start executing, okay, step one, boom, step two, boom, and you just keep going. The motivation just literally, it continues to augment itself, right? Then you work and you do all the things and then you're sore, right? And you feel that, like, even if you've done any sort of, you work on this, you guys work together on this, you've done all, you first start and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many different things, like, oh, the audio, the video, the splicing, the editing, the lighting, oh my God. Like everything is like this constant mold of chaos. And you start doing the one thing, that was hard. That's a mess. Oh my. So as soon as you feel satisfied, you're like, no, you're not done yet. Yeah. But you can see, and you look at other podcasts or whatever, and you see the one that started like some dude standing in front of his iPhone, and it's like wonky as hell, right? But then 10 years later, it's like this, the Joe Rogan podcast is so good because he's curated all these elements that even though there's a microphone stuffed in his face, it looks a little weird, it's endearing. Like people are like, oh, it's cool,
Yeah.
But that go back to exercise, that's the sore part of it, right? Like you're like, it looks dumb, But you keep building and you keep building one small step after another, bit by bit, like the ants pregnant with their, digging out one grain of sand after another to build their anthills, So to me, and this frames into what we're talking about, we want to tell everybody to motivate the world. Just to have purpose, to have intentionality, find the purpose. Don't subject yourself to the torture of thinking, I'm going to build Tesla. Stop with that silliness. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, we look at all the different people in history that were important, right? There was a dude who launched the lifeboats off the Titanic and he died. Right? Yep. That dude, to those people who were on those lifeboats, most important man in history. He saved their life. Don't try to sit there and change your position in history. It's stupid, right? And you're always going to disappoint yourself because you're never going to be good enough, you know? But just find something. Don't make it like the most miserable thing in the world. Like, oh, I'm going to go be a garbage man now. I'm going to be the best garbage man in the world. Like, all right, dude, look, don't find something to be purposely torturous. Find something that's within the realm of what you enjoy, you know? And as long as it's not intrinsically evil. Like, if you enjoy killing people, I'm not expressing that people should be serial killers. You know? But find something that's worthy of, that's helpful to other people, no matter how trivial you might think it is or unimportant. Don't worry about it. Because what you're going to do as you do it better and better and better for yourself, you know, like you say, oh, I could do this. By your own intention, you know, not selfishly, but you intentionally see that, oh, people don't like that, so I'm going to adjust this to make it better for that person. I'm going to adjust that to make it better for this person. You just keep on going. And then all of a sudden, you get 10 years down the road of you doing this thing all the time, and what you're known for, you know? Like, again, start with Joe Rogan, you know? He's got 3.5 hour long podcasts. And when he started doing that, everybody's like, well, you going to edit those down? He's like, no, I like this. And he just kept doing it.
Yeah.
And what separates his podcast from everybody else's is that he is purposefully stupid, right? Like, he knows how to ask the right questions. Like, he is the best curious person I've ever seen in my life. And so he's sitting in front of somebody, even if he completely disagrees with them, he still tries to learn from them. He's still like, and you know, because you just watched two podcast episodes ago, that he knew all this other stuff, and then he sits in front of this next guy, and he's like, I don't know anything about this stuff. You know? He's like, whoa, you know, bullshit.
Yeah.
But it's great because you watch it. What it does, it feeds his ability to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
He's an incredible questioner. Incredible. So you can be good at questions. You can be good at raising dogs. You can be good at raising kids. You can be good at whatever it is. Just start with something you think is of value, or you see a need, or you see something lacking, and just keep going. And don't get discouraged by its value in society. That's the other thing that I think is crazy, that everybody keeps on trying to Instagram their life.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram is just a cesspool for jealousy. That's all it is. If you're on Instagram, fantastic. You're just feeding jealousy. That's all you want to do, right? And I don't like to do it because it's all imagery. It's all image-based. Image. And as a form of communication, it kind of sucks. You just throw out an image out there and that's the end of it. And so I don't like that because it's just constant feeding, you know, and everything has its limitations. So I'm not saying it's intrinsically evil, but this is what it feeds, right? So don't worry about that image. If you got to get the image out there to attract people to what you're doing and it's a marketing ploy, I get it. You know, it's like, it's not the end of the world. It's like I said, it's not in and of itself evil, but don't make that your thing. You know, don't make it all about like just having an Instagram page. You know, if it's an aspect of it, okay. Yeah. But worry about the integrity of it. Make it stand the test of time. Make it build, you know, make it for others, you know, like there's all these different aspects of it, you know, and don't be afraid. That's the other thing. I'm sorry, not don't be courageous. This is the one thing I really have a big problem with people today. No one wants to take a stand. Everyone's afraid. And then they see the person who does take a stand and like, oh, I couldn't do that. But if you roll it back to before the time when anybody heard of that individual who took a stand, they were probably sitting in a corner feeling just as miserable as you do. Take a stand. You're going to do it wrong. It doesn't matter. Take a stand, and then you learn by saying something stupid that you shouldn't have said that. Or there's a better way to say it. But if you don't ever practice saying things wrong, you'll never, or you don't have the comfort of being able to say things that need to be said and saying them incorrectly or maybe inappropriately or maybe coarsely or maybe a little bit too offensively or whatever. If you don't have that comfort and the humility to say, okay, I said something that needed to be said, but I really said it in such a way that that person was unnecessarily hurt by it. I'm going to change that. So the next time I inform that person, I'm actually educating them instead of offending them or pushing them away. I've got to be better at that, you know, all these different things. So don't be afraid to go out there. Like I said about the foundations of the churches, like everybody changed all that stuff all the time, you know, and, you know, but they still stand the test of time. They still last forever because they keep on building on what they learned before and they trusted their elders and, you know, all these other things. But yeah, I mean, we're so in a position of doing what we're told, and we're ignoring God, who's telling us all the time. You know, that's the conspiracy. You know, the conspiracy of God working within all of us at the same time. You know,
people lost the capabilities of being able to control themselves. So you're always directed towards something else controlling you. Like, the best case scenario would always be you would want God to kind of direct your life. But when you take God out of your life, us as humans, we don't have the capability to be able to control our lives in the ways that we want to. So what ultimately happens is that something is going to control your life. But if you're not letting it be God, it's going to be everything that you don't want to control your life is going to ultimately control it.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing. Like, somebody said to me recently about what was it? It was about conforming to God's will. I can't remember the other part. It was a great quote, and
I'll come to you right after we turn the cameras
right
off.
Absolutely right after. But it was just the idea of like, I can't remember the two words that were used, but conceptually it was that the idea of like resigning yourself to what God's demanding of you, or literally letting it be who you are, right? And I can't remember what the second term is. The conforming is like, all right, fine, I'll do what God tells me to do, and I'll go through life that way. And that's a significant aspect of my life, and there has been enjoying that. But what I've been learning how to do in probably the last 5 or 6 years, and especially after COVID, I realized the urgency to do this is so important, is literally being God in this, by not being God as in like you're your own demigod or that. No, but being God by letting him work through you, right? Mm-hmm. Like now you are God's will because you've just abandoned yourself to it, like you've just completely emptied yourself of all your thoughts and desires, and this is what you desire, right? That's the hard part, right? How do I desire this thing that I don't even know how to define? I can't put a finger on it. I can't like read about it. How do I let that happen to me? How do I make sure that the only things that are coming through me is the Holy Spirit? How do I empty myself of all that, And a lot of times you see so many people, right? They find God in prison, or they find God in a gutter. They find God in the prodigal sons, right? In the pigsty, right? Because that's when they finally let go of this intellectual desire or this sinful desire to feel these different experiences or whatever. But instead, they just want to like let God flow through them. Just do with me what you will, and that starts working through your body. And I'm trying to describe it in such a way that I know I can read about it, but it's clearly not happening in my life right now, But it's something I wish I could do, like I don't know what I'm not doing. I don't know what I'm doing too much of. I haven't lined it up. Like, where am I letting go,
Mm-hmm.
So, but the interesting thing is, even in all that, where I know I'm not letting go, I'm not completely, unfettered or just letting God work through me. I also have this tremendous amount, like people ask me before, like, why are you so confident that things will work out? I'm like, because it always does. How can you be unconfident that it's not going to work out? This is a world that's been like, before Christ came, everyone was a terrible person, Everyone didn't even have a sense of what the ideal was. We'd lost all that right after the fall. And even if you go into the pagan world where there was no understanding of Adam and Eve or anything like that, everyone was terrible, right? Everyone was just operating on whatever whacked out tyrannical principles were in their midst, whether it was self-serving or the king was in charge or the dictator or I was a slave or all these other horrific social constructs or social organizational things. None of it was good. And yet here we are. We're still here. Yeah. It's still working. It's still going. It worked out, Like, we're all here because thousands and thousands of people kept on shacking up and making more and more kids, and all that lineage of thousands of people merging into me. Yeah. Like if I split all the, I can go back, 12 generations to get 1,000 people. 1,000 people. Yeah. All those couples out there producing a kid who produced another kid who produced another kid. And I'm like, it's mind-blowing to me how many people had to do things in order for me to live. It's
pretty nuts.
And I'm just going to be like, I'm playing video games tonight.
Or come on a podcast.
Also, I can sit here and run my mouth on a podcast, But
if led to this.
But I mean, I'm just saying, it's like, if that's not motivation enough to be like, shoot, and you got here, and then you roll back to how comfortable things are now. I mean, I remember during the Gulf War when it's like, when we hit the point, like, I don't remember how long it was, where we hit the point that 1,000 soldiers had died in the Gulf War. And it wasn't minutes. You know, it was days.
Mm-hmm.
And we're even talking about a significant amount of them where people like who had like forklift accidents, or, you know, that person, you know, tried to clean his gun, shot himself in the head by accident, or, you know, fell into a hole, or, you know, like all these non-violence related things are just stupidity, right? I thought, oh my gosh, at D-Day, we lost 25 in the first hour or something absurd like that. Mm-hmm. And that, statistically speaking, across a population that was severely less than it is now.
Yeah.
And we're freaking out because 1,000 people died. How comfortable is our life? How wonderful have we made this world? You know, that we're just like, 1,000 people died in a huge war?
I think.
Or we have the greatest killing machines of all time. And only 1,000 people died, you know?
80% of those deaths you said for D-Day, I think they're at Omaha too.
At Omaha Beach.
Yeah. I think 80% of the deaths that happened on D-Day were at Omaha.
But that was an improvement. Yeah. Like you roll back to the Civil War, you know, like we look at all the deaths that we've had in all the wars with foreign countries in this country, in the United States, I should say. And if you add them all together, it's still not nearly as much as died in the Civil War. We're really good at killing people, and we're really good at killing ourselves. Yeah. We're best at that, you know. But that Civil War number was over 500,000, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was 675,000.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like an entire city, man.
That basically
Akron twice.
Yes!
Exactly.
Just wipe out all of Akron. I'll do some places, and that would work out for me. I can think of some places around here.
Yeah. I mean, that's the population of Detroit. Yeah. So.
Definitely. Let's go. Skip out of here. Just big parking lot. Yeah. No, but it's just, so we've created a world where now we don't have to be worried about whether or not we're going to walk out the street and get mauled by marauders, you know? And if it does happen, man, everyone's pissed off. No, we don't do that here. You know, even the places, you know, we talk about like violent cities and everybody's pissed off about that. Whereas you roll it back, even 100 years, what are you worried about, man? It's just how it is, you know? Yeah. That many people died in a year? Whew, I thought you were talking about today. Oh, man, I don't know what you're worried about, you know? Like, how do you think about that? Like, I was driving down the highway today, and I saw, you know, because the traffic pattern changes, like, 3 lanes. And I thought about, my gosh, can you imagine if I brought in a dude from, like, the 1800s and brought him here?
This is mine.
Like, he's crazy. Like, I'm hurtling down the road at 80 miles an hour, changing traffic, and he's probably But then my next thought was, he would look at this and say, this is the Tower of Babel. Yeah. Like, we're building all this stuff for our own comfort and our own ability to do things and be godly and be more and more powerful and powerful and powerful. And he'd be like, I don't want this. This is terrible. Mm-hmm. You know? And we'd look at him like, what's wrong with you, man? Yeah, this is so cool, you know? And I'm like, and then my next thought is, AC, dude, air conditioning. But no, so I try to always think back, you know, and actually Christine's the one that planted the seed in my head like 20 years ago, and it's raged on. And it started with like Lent, and our air conditioner had broken at our house. That's why I made the AC joke. And it was South Carolina, and it was so hot. And I don't know if it was that it broke and it just couldn't keep up with the heat, you know, it wasn't a powerful enough air conditioner. And it was Lent, and we couldn't get you know, short of replacing the air conditioner, which we couldn't afford at the time. It was what it was. That was it. Fans everywhere, the whole nine, but it wasn't going to get any cooler, you know. That was like 95 degrees in South Carolina, whatever. But it was Lent, and I remember her saying, you know, because I made the comment, I was like, well, I know we don't have to give up anything for Lent. We just gave up AC, you know. And she looked at me, she goes, wow, just think, 100 years ago, this is how they lived. And they found a way to give up things for Lent. And I was like, damn.
Humbled. Yeah. I thought I had some.
Why not marry you?
Yeah. Women have that beautiful ability just to take you. You can be here, and then it's just bam.
Yeah, just knock you down.
Right back to reality.
Yeah. But it's been in my head for so long that we sit here and we just like congratulate ourselves. We're like, oh, I did Exodus 90. Oh, you mean you just lived in the 1800s?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, like, you look at Exodus 90, what are you doing?
It's
nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
You're literally doing nothing.
Yeah, it's
But I think we've all done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and I'll never do the damn thing. How freaking traumatic, right?
Yeah.
No, my
honestly,
dad still takes cold showers every day.
We're gonna talk about your dad. He's told me that. I'm like, I don't know how. And the funny thing is, I know how beneficial cold showers are.
Yeah,
They're way more healthy for you.
They're incredibly healthy.
But they don't
my
feel
dad
as good.
claims he's in the best shape that he's ever been in his entire life.
I would not be surprised.
I think he might have. He's in better shape than I am. So.
I just cannot cross that stabbing, needly feeling of those cold showers.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, it's so.
Oof. So every day I get in the shower, I look at it, and I'm like, tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's like that too. To play on that, like the, it's like one day or day one. It's like no.
Hey,
it
starts with intentionality.
Yeah, it's my Mexican side of my life. You know?
Yeah.
Like my Hispanic roots. Mañana. No, but it's wild. You know, you think about all that stuff all the time. It's like we think we got it good, but we don't. You know, we're just distracted.
Yeah.
You know, and as such, that's why I said it's a Tower of Babel. It's like we think, oh, I can do this, I can do that, and you go through the list of all the things that 1800s people could not do, and now you can do it. And guess what? As a result, because I can do all these things by myself, I do not need God's help to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think about all the time. Like, what do we need to do? And I wonder, am I incapable at this point because of all the comforts that I experience in the modern world? Am I incapable of that action of abandonment? You know, because I'm hooked. Yeah. How do I get rid of that? And when you think about it, what's the big reason why I hold back? I have these kids. And if I F this thing up that I got going on that's barely working, how are my kids going to get affected? So it's a noble cause that's worthy. You know, I want to feed my kids. I want them to have what they need. You know, I want to provide for them, whatever that definition is. And it's a subjective definition, you know, and for me it's different than for someone else, you know. But how do I uphold that and let go of everything else? Or maybe I'm supposed to let go of that. You know, it's like it's a wild thing, you know, because it's like, you know, so, and then of course I look around the animals and they're all just happy as hell, no clothes, nothing going on, eating whatever the hell they want, you know. Yeah. Running around the woods all day long, you know, somehow magically not bothered by all the mosquitoes out there. But you know, so it's like I look at all that stuff and I'm like, wow. And that, to me, they're abandoning everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really puts things in like a crazy perspective. But I don't know. We usually have Brian let us know what time it is, but we don't know how long we're recording. But this has been absolutely fantastic.
It's only 9:20.
Hey, we're 20 minutes into the debate right now.
What debate?
Yeah, 5 minutes. It started at 9:15.
9:15. Okay.
The two old dudes yelling at each other.
Yeah, it's gonna be fantastic.
Literally,
Great yelling match.
We'll get there one day.
Literally couldn't care less.
Yeah. I'm like excited for the memes.
I'm just waiting till tomorrow. Exactly.
Yeah.
All the memes and the clips.
Let people run through everything and then give me the information.
I would rather sit down and enjoy my day and other things and just let somebody go through the misery of those 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then all the wonderful clips will arrive in my inbox first thing in the morning, and it'll be a marvelous meme day.
Yeah.
We all know it's coming.
Tomorrow is going to be fantastic.
Twitter will be a good spot.
It will be. I'm so excited.
It's like it's the asshole versus the idiot. Yeah. And nobody knows which one's which.
No.
We do know something they're going to do, which will be to give a final statement. And it's my...
Yeah, what we're leading into is we like our guests to leave a final thought, call to action to our audience. Oh. So, this is your time.
That's your camera.
That's your camera.
Oh.
Only that now.
Yeah.
And you're going to edit this anyway, right?
Yeah, probably.
So, the call to action is be courageous, listen to God's will for you, be humble, and go do it. There's no try, there's do or do not. And start small, start reasonably, and you're going to determine what reasonably is. And keep building every single day and be a better version of yourself, a more holy version of yourself. And even if you're the most blatant, horrific sinner, that's a good start. Keep going forward. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Ivan, this has been absolutely fantastic.
Boogity, boogity, boogity.
We appreciate you coming on, and that has been the Just Like You and Me podcast. We'll see you next time.
Boom.